Good afternoon, sixth graders. It's Mrs. Nelson coming at you with your science lesson for today. Today's lesson is all about changes of state. Well, what are changes in state? The four changes we're talking about today are melting, evaporation, freezing, and condensation. This graphic shows that when we add heat, we change state, and when we remove heat, we change state. Well, what does it mean to change state in matter? A change of state is changing one substance from one physical form to another. Okay? A physical change means the substance only changes its appearance, but it's still the same substance. Well, how do substances change state? The way they do it, boys and girls, is by adding or removing energy. And one type of energy is heat. So when we add heat or when we remove heat, we can change states of matter. Let's take a look at this graphic here. This represents how heat can change states of matter. We have ice, which is a solid, and when we add energy or heat, that solid changes into a liquid state. It's water now. When we continue to add energy or heat, that liquid water will change again into a gas, which is now steam. And when we add energy, the particles in matter will start to move faster and they start spreading out. So you can see the particles in the solid are close together and they're organized. When we add heat, the particles start to move around and they start to spread out. And when we continue to add heat, and that liquid here now is a gas, the particles will just continue to spread out more and more. Let's talk about melting for a minute. The melting is a change of state from a solid to a liquid. You guys have all seen or heard of something melting. Energy has to be added to the substance to make it melt. Okay, so again, this is another graphic that shows what happens when we add heat to different states of matter. When we add heat to a solid, it melts into a liquid. When we continue to add heat to a liquid, it will evaporate into a gas. Melting, as a substance is melting, the particles start moving faster because the energy was added. So the particles are spreading out. They're not as tightly packed together like they are in a solid. They're loosely packed. Let's talk about evaporation, another change of state. We talked about melting, which is going from a solid to a liquid. But when we take that liquid and we continue to add heat, that liquid changes to a gas. Energy must be added again to make it evaporate. Solid, add heat, liquid, add heat, gas. So the particles now, here in the liquid state, are moving even faster when they go from a liquid to a gas. They're spreading out even farther and farther away from each other. So you can see here we have freezing and melting happening from a solid to a liquid. And then we have evaporation and condensation happening from a gas to a liquid. We can actually reverse the process and remove energy. We're taking away the heat. And if we remove energy or we lower the temperature of the matter, the particles start to slow down and they start to move slower and they become closer together when we remove energy. Freezing is another change of state that we're talking about today. Freezing is the change from a liquid to a solid. Remember, we're removing heat. We're removing energy in order for that liquid to change into a solid. So we have water here. If we remove the energy or the heat, it turns to ice. Okay? If we add heat, the ice will change state into water. Again, freezing. As the energy is removed and the substance is freezing, the particles start to move slower. They're getting closer together. So here, the particles are in a liquid state. Now it's changing state to a solid. And look at how nicely they're packed together and organized. These are the particles of the solid. Let's talk about the last form. It's condensation. You might have noticed when you're drinking a cold glass of ice water and you bring it outdoors on a hot day, it's almost like the glass starts to sweat. You can see it on a pop can too. You can start to see that there's liquid kind of dripping from the sides. You might even see it on a mirror after a shower. Condensation is when gas changes to a liquid. So the energy is removed and the gas cools down to form a liquid. Oh, here's the example I was talking about. All the steam from a hot shower, when it cools, it creates condensation, which are water droplets on the mirror. It's changing from a gas to a liquid. When energy is removed, those particles, they start moving slower. Just think about you. If you're cold, I kind of start moving slower too, right? I'm cold and my particles are slowing down. And that's what happens with matter too. We can see here, this is the particles in a gas, and when we remove the energy, when it gets cooler, they start to move closer and move slower. All right, guys, so this is kind of wrapping up what we've talked about today, okay? So we've talked about melting and boiling and freezing and condensing. Let's look right here. Follow my cursor, all right? We have a solid, and we are going to add heat. When we add heat or energy, that solid melts into a liquid. If we continue to add more heat and energy to that liquid, the liquid will start boiling and eventually turn states into a gas. Now when we're going backwards, we're removing energy, we are removing heat, and that gas will cool down and start condensing into a liquid. If we continue to cool that liquid and remove heat from the liquid will then freeze into a solid. You guys, that is what I have for you on changes of state. I hope it was clear and that you learned something. Have a great day. Goodbye.